Good evening, everyone. We're just waiting for a few people to take their seats and we'll get started. Thanks for being patient with us tonight as we let people come in the door here. Okay, just checking online. Matt, are we good? All right, great. Okay, welcome everyone to our public information meeting for EQ Detroit doing business as usual Ecology Detroit South. This is for their hazardous waste license renewal application. Glad you're here tonight with us. My name is Bill Ostrowski. I'm with the Environmental Support Division at Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. I'm going to help moderate tonight. We're going to start off with a short presentation by our staff here, and then we're going to move into questions and answers. So if you have a question, you'll be able to raise your hand and we'll come around to you and ask that question, and we'll do our best to answer. Just to let you all know, we do have, this is a hybrid meeting, meaning you're here today with us, and we also have people online. And Matt, how many people do we have online with us right now logged in?
22.
22 people are logged in online. And for those that aren't logged in online, just to let you know, the lines are muted. If you have a question, you can type it into the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar, or you can click the raise hand icon to ask a question when we get to that point. And I want you to all know too that this meeting is being recorded, and we will post it online on our YouTube channel. It will probably be available tomorrow night or by the end of the day tomorrow. I also want to note that we do have interpretation services for this meeting. We have both Bengali and Arabic interpreters. We have interpretive services right up front. If you need interpretive services, you can get a headset from them, and they will provide interpretive services for you. Also online, we're happy to have interpreters as well. So people join online, if you would like to listen in a different language, in Bengali or Arabic, you can click on the interpretive services button on your Zoom toolbar, and you should be able to listen in that channel. All channels and languages are being recorded, and they will all be posted by tomorrow evening. Okay, I'm going to let our staff introduce themselves, and then we'll move on to the presentation. So go ahead.
Hello. Hi, I'm Sienna Kilgore. I'm the permit engineer for this facility.
Hi everyone, my name is Todd Zinda. I'm the Hazardous Waste District Inspector of the Warren District Office, and I'm an environmental engineer, oversee all of the treatment, storage, and disposal facilities in Southeast Michigan.
Hi everybody, my name is Sam Cairns. I'm the project geologist assigned to the facility.
Hello, I'm Sean Shields. I'm the project environmental quality analyst for the facility.
All right, Tiana, you want to come up and do your presentation, and then after your presentation, we will do questions and answers.
Hello. Good. Thank you all for coming. So the purpose of tonight's meeting, we're going to do an overview of the facility's hazardous waste operations. We're going to talk a little bit about the license renewal process and the draft license we put out, and give you guys an opportunity to ask us questions to the panel. So quick agenda, we're going to talk about what is hazardous waste, who is EGLE. We're going to go over the licensing history of this site, the facility layout, and also the location, the license renewal process, some of the draft license conditions, highlighting some of the bigger points we want to bring up. Then I'm going to turn it over to Todd for a compliance summary, and then we'll do our Q&A. So what is hazardous waste? Hazardous waste is defined as any waste capable of causing harm to human health and the environment. There are two different types of hazardous waste. There's characteristic and listed waste. Listed waste is considered hazardous because of the process that it comes from, the industrial or manufacturing process. So think like lead plating operations or pesticide manufacturing. Any waste coming from that would be considered listed. On the other side, we have that characteristic waste, and those are wastes that exhibit a physical or chemical property of being reactive, corrosive, ignitable, or toxic. And that's what makes that hazardous. So under federal and state law, if a facility wishes to treat, store, dispose any of these types of waste, they have to have an operating license to do so. And that's where we come in. So who is EGLE? EGLE is the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. Our mission is to protect Michigan's public health and environment by regulating air, land, water, and energy resources. Specifically tonight, we have here EGLE's Materials Management Division. We primarily work on waste management, things like recycling work, landfills.
Sorry, folks, we're having trouble hearing all that stuff.
Hello? Right? So for EGLE's Materials Management Division, we do a lot of the waste management services around the state, so think regulation of recycling, landfills, hazardous waste facilities. We are overseen and partially funded by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, and the licenses we issue to these facilities dictate when, where, and how waste can be managed on site. So think, how long can a barrel stay on site? You know, where exactly on the site can these containers be located? How can they be processed? How can they be stored? Aisle spacing, all of that we take a look at and review. These licenses can last up to 10 years, at which point the company is required to submit a renewal application. And EGLE also takes this as an opportunity to look at the current operations and conditions surrounding the facility and see if any changes need to be made there. So going into the licensing history, so this site has industrial history dating back to around the early 1900s. They were, a supply manufacturer, a warehouse, a wire manufacturer. They did a lot of rendering services, but eventually in the 1980s, they converted to waste operations. That was right around the time both federal and state laws were coming into play for regulation of hazardous waste. And once that occurred, the state gave the facility authorization to treat hazardous waste while we figured out what that permitting process would look like. What exactly do we want to see on an application? What are we going to put in a permit? So that authorization happened in 1990. Once we figured out kind of what a permit was going to look like, the first license application came in 1999, and the first license was issued in 2003. Quick thing to note is the 2003 license was issued to U.S. Liquids, and a year later, EQ Detroit purchased U.S. Liquids. So if you look on our website, that license might have a 2004 date, and that's the difference, that a year later, the license was transferred ownership. So that's where that change comes from. And under state law, if a facility submits a timely and complete renewal application prior to the expiration date on the existing license, they are allowed to continue operating under that existing license until EGLE's finished doing their review and making a final decision on the application. In this case, the complete renewal application was submitted in September of 2008, which was before the December 2008 deadline, an expiration date of the existing license. So that's how the existing license is currently being used. So this is the facility. It is located at 1923 Frederick Street at the corner of East Ferry Street and St. Aubin. As you can see with this red, the facility is completely fenced in. The only entrance is a gated entrance here off Kirby Street. As soon as you come in, you arrive at the security office, which is located right here. The security office is staffed 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and the entire site is under surveillance. At this facility, they're treating and storing hazardous waste, and no disposal being done. In particular, they can store 600,000 gallons of hazardous waste in containers, an additional 600,000 gallons in tanks, and that all has a time limit for up to a year. So any one container could be there for up to a year, at which point they need to either dispose of it or send it somewhere else to be taken care of. In terms of treatment, they have a maximum daily treatment capacity of 1.8 million gallons per day. I should note that treatment only occurs in tanks at this facility. And the way that's broken up, I kind of broke down right here. So 500,000 gallons of that is from the Great Lakes Water Authority. They kind of specified that limit, and that's for their wastewater treatment operations. The remaining 1.3 million gallons is for stabilization of hazardous waste. That's kind of where you take hazardous waste and you mix it with reagent to bind up those hazardous constituents so that it doesn't leach before disposing. And I'll go a little bit more into that in a future slide. So kind of breaking down that image I had from before into like specific areas of operation on site. All of these green squares are container storage areas on site. So that's where hazardous waste containers are being stored. These container storage areas are typically concrete pads with curbing around them, and they're all coated with a Zypex coating. It makes them impermeable. So, you know, if rain comes on the pad or if a spill were to occur, that prevents runoff and also prevents infiltration into the soil below. Next, we move on to these pink areas. That's where tank storage occurs at the site. This box here, the pink, that's where the wastewater treatment plant is on site. And over here is where they do the chemical stabilization or fixation treatment that we were talking about. And I have another slide to kind of go a little bit further into this building as a whole. And then wanted to point out these transportation areas. They have this spot here and these here. Those are the areas on site where trailers are allowed to be at. Some of them are used for inbound waste, some of them are used for outbound waste. You know, some of it might be treated already and leaving the site to be disposed of elsewhere. Other waste is being transshipped, which is when the facility takes waste on site, stores it for a short period of time, and then ships it somewhere else. It's mostly done as like a convenience for their customers, like a one-stop shop type thing. So that's where all the trailers are located. And then last thing I wanted to note was this L shape here with all of these tanks. These are all used oil processing tanks. They are not licensed for hazardous waste treatment or storage. They are regulated under our rules and they are inspected by Todd when he goes out, but they are not part of this license. So if you look into our license, these won't be included because they're not used for hazardous waste. So going back to that chemical fixation building I was talking about, here's a picture inside of the building. As you can see along the one wall is container storage, and then coming closer to us, you see the tanks that are used for hazardous waste treatment. They are also used for non-hazardous waste, and they have a solid waste license for that. There are 6 tanks, so one here, 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 and then there's one behind this structure here. So as you can see, they don't look like a traditional tank, like some of those other ones that we saw in that last image. These are almost like a vault type structure. So they have a steel liner and they're inside of a concrete containment with a leak detection in between the two materials. So it's almost like a giant swimming pool kind of way we think of it. So in total, this facility has 6 in-ground tanks, but only 3 are currently in use following the consent order From last summer, the company chose to only repair 3 of the 6 tanks. The other 3 are awaiting full replacement, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But for now, only 3 of them are being used. They represent roughly 70% of the overall capacity that could be treated in here. But that's that. And then back to that maximum daily treatment capacity. So that's based on like a best case scenario where we're treating a really easy to treat waste that has a post-treatment analysis that runs very quickly. Typically, post-treatment analysis takes 12 plus hours to get the results back, whereas this takes in some cases, it can take like an hour depending on what type of waste is being treated. So the total capacity for all 6 of these tanks is 430,000 gallons. But that 1.3 million comes in because theoretically, if every tank took in a really easy waste, they could theoretically in 24 hours treat 3 batches per tank. So I think 18 batches total. So that's where that 1.3 million comes from. So moving into the license renewal process. So once the application comes in, we distribute the documents among our staff for review. We also send it to EPA or our air quality division. We take their feedback for things where they're more subject matter experts, like the ambient air monitoring program or maybe even the waste analysis. Once everyone's done their own internal reviews, we will come to a decision on the technical adequacy. If it's adequate, then we will move on to drafting a license. Once we have a draft license prepared based off of that application, we'll come to you, the public, which is why we're here tonight. And we want your guys' comments. We want to know what you like about the license, what you don't like, if you think we missed something based on the review of that application documents. That's all feedback that is very helpful for continuing on to make changes to that draft license. So we hold that public comment period and the hearing. After that, once the public comment period closes, we do a full review of all the comments we've received through that time. We will issue a response to comments. So we have a big long model document so you can see all the comments that other people made and what we made and see all the responses we gave. And at that point, we'll make a final decision on what to do about this license. So in terms of the draft license that is out right now, these are some of the conditions that we want to highlight and things that are changing. So the waste analysis plan, as part of the consent order from last summer and this license application, the facility is implementing improved fingerprinting. Fingerprinting is basically how the facility ensures that what waste is coming in is what it's supposed to be, and they're capable of treating or storing it. And if they can't, then they have to get rid of it and take it off-site to be treated or disposed of elsewhere. So they've improved that process, looking at things closer, increased discrepancy procedures, things like that. In terms of inspections, there are new inspection requirements for tanks and containers. For tanks, they have to do a thickness evaluation, so they have to empty out their tanks every year and check the thickness of it. And we determined a minimum spec for that thickness, and they have to ensure that the tank never falls below that thickness. If it does, then they need to take it out of service. And that ensures that the tank's integrity maintains for years. Container storage areas, similar process. They have to clean them all out every year, and they have to inspect the concrete, look for any cracks, gaps, gouges, or even if the coating is messed up, all that kind of stuff to make sure that that remains an impermeable surface for those containers for any spills that way. The engineering plans, like I mentioned, they're planning on replacing those tanks in the chemical fixation building. So they have, US Ecology has proposed an improved tank design. Instead of that single-walled steel structure that I was talking about inside the concrete, they're actually going to upgrade it to a double-walled steel inside of the the concrete, and there'll be a new electronic leak detection system. And as you saw in that previous image, the treatment is done with an excavator, so these new tanks will be curved to help better accommodate treatment. So that is something that's included in this draft license. At closure, we have included additional requirements for things to be done at closure, such as soil sampling underneath the chemical fixation building or the rail area, some of those outdoor locations. Lastly, for environmental monitoring, the facility has installed a new ambient air monitoring station downwind of the facility, closer to the residential area zone. So that station will become operated and monitored along with the rest of the system. And they will be establishing a site-wide groundwater monitoring network. And with that, I will turn it over to Todd to talk about compliance.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. And I'm Todd Zinda, the district inspector. Going to try to give you a brief summary of the compliance history for the facility, and then a description of what hazardous waste inspection is. So this facility is inspected a minimum of 4 times a year. I do a comprehensive inspection 1 time a year, which would evaluate the license conditions of the facility, and then any applicable hazardous waste or liquid industrial byproduct regulations or universal waste regulations. Universal waste would be like your batteries, lamps, aerosol containers. Those are exempt from the hazardous waste regulations. They still accept them here. We still evaluate them. Liquid industrial byproducts waste would be non-haz liquids or used oil. Tiana showed you a portion of that facility. There's used oil tanks that process used oil here. That's not a licensed activity, but we would still review that once a year. So a comprehensive inspection, we would look at all the license conditions and all the applicable regulations and make a compliance determination. The other 3 quarters, so it's every 3 quarters, roughly every 3 months. The other focus inspections allows me to focus on certain aspects of the facility operations. The incident that happened back in 2023 when the tanks were unfit for use, I spent a lot of time going to the facility and evaluating the tank conditions and the containment or container storage areas in the chem fix building. So that a focused compliance inspection may just focus on one particular aspect of the operations. All of the inspections would include a visual walkthrough of the facility, but like I said, the focus might just be certain aspects. Another aspect of a focused inspection would be looking at all their emergency response equipment and their contingency plan, walking through the facility and assessing that they have the appropriate spill equipment or PPE or emergency equipment that they're required for their license. So the inspections include a visual inspection. I kind of touched on that. We'll look at container storage, container condition. We'll look at the tanks, the containment areas. They have security and alarm requirements. And then a big part of it is not only the visual walkthrough, but then there's an extensive record review. So that's going to involve sitting down at a conference table and going through manifests, waste approvals. Whenever a generator of hazardous waste sends waste to them, they have to notify the company what the waste is, and then they have documentation that's provided, and then they compare the manifest and make sure the waste is matching what they're expecting to receive. They have waste acceptance paperwork. Tiana touched on improved fingerprinting at this facility. That was part of the administrative consent order, which I'll talk about a little bit in a second, but basically the improved waste acceptance is a way that they can verify that the waste they're receiving is the waste they're expecting. So they screen a certain percentage of the containers or bulk containers that they receive to make and compare it to the profile to assess if it's what the generator told them. We would review treatment records, the Chem Fix building. For each one of those treatment batches, there's a record that's associated with it, shows all the material that went in there, the batch, the reagents that are used for treatment, and then the post-treatment analysis that shows that it met the treatment standard so it can go for final disposal and landfill. We would review the facility inspection records. Facility has inspections that are attached to the license that they're required to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, and we basically are making sure they're doing their own paperwork the way they're supposed to do. That personnel training records we have to review and contingency plan. There's other items, but this just kind of gives you a brief touch of the extensive nature of the inspection. If there are issues identified through an inspection, we would either identify it through a violation notice or compliance communication. Violation notice is typically used for recalcitrant violations, so repeat offenders, like I keep going in and they're not labeling something and it's documented over and over again. Eventually that might be a violation notice. Compliance communication is typically used for a softer violation, something that's easily resolvable. But obviously if we have the same thing occurring, it might rise to a violation notice. The issues with the tanks being unfit for use a couple of years ago, that went out as a violation notice, and then we pursued enforcement action. I think the next slide. So we have two ways that we would resolve, well, we have, I guess, two separate ways that we would use to resolve issues. So we could, if it's a compliance communication, we could just resolve it through documentation or follow-up from the company. And then we would document it, they'd show that they corrected the issue, and we would resolve it. That would be the end of it. And that can be done through them providing us documentation, paperwork, or me doing a follow-up inspection. A more severe case would be a violation notice that is, so significant that we have to resolve it formally through either a consent order, if we can reach an agreement with the facility, and if we can't, then we could pursue litigation. On July 15th, 2024, we did enter an administrative consent order with the facility. This was to resolve a number of issues that I documented over a series of a couple of years, but the biggest being the tanks being unfit for use. They had a fire at the facility. They had containment issues for some of their container storage areas. There's kind of I have a list of everything. I'm just kind of giving you the high points, but there were enough that we rolled them all into one consent order. The consent order resulted in, and some of you probably are aware of this, resulted in a penalty of close to $1 million. And there's a supplemental environmental project that's been submitted from the company to Eagle that will be a project that the majority of that money from the penalty will be applied for the supplemental environmental project. That project is still under MMD review. It has not been approved, and that money is still sitting in escrow until we make that determination. I did just go out there this past Friday and did a full comprehensive inspection. So August 8th, I was out there. I donned the respirator. I was in the Chem Fix building. We did a full inspection of the facility. I will say that this facility has improved quite a bit. I didn't find any compliance issues. They're going to be in compliance for this quarter. They've made great strides in trying to address their inspection issues. We're clearing all the items that have been found as part of the consent order. I'm hopeful that we continue down this path, but that remains to be seen, and that's the intent of our program, to make sure we can hold them accountable. So that's it for right now. Sure.
So that's about it for our presentation. Just a couple reminders before we move into the question and answer period. So we will be holding another public meeting and the public hearing on September 4th. It'll be at Tech Town, right across the street, at 6 p.m. as well. So if you'd like to come give comments then, please do. We, like I said, we want to hear these comments. We want the feedback on the draft license and the application as a whole. The public comment period is open. It opened July 31st and will run until September 15th. If you would like to submit a comment, I have put my contact information up there. Please send me a comment or email. You can give me a phone call, a voicemail. You can send it to our Hazardous inbox, or you can mail it through US mail. I will note though that if you are mailing it, it needs to be postmarked by September 15th. If the comment is not postmarked by September 15th, it won't be included in the response to comments, but we'll still do our best to respond to your comment. So I've included the mailing address there as well. Yeah, that's it. I'll turn it back over to Jim then for the Q&A.
Okay, thanks, Tiana. At this point, what we're going to do is open it up for questions from all of you here or anybody that's online. So, Tiana, can you give me one of those mics? We're gonna a little switch here. Sorry. I'm gonna give one to Tracy, and Tracy, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself as well.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tracy Cascanetti. I'm the acting director of the Materials Management Division.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is if you have a question, Tracy and I will be here, and we're gonna hold on to the mics, and if you have a question, we're gonna talk to you. So anybody have a question? Sure. Oh, one over there, and Tracy, I'll hang out back, and if you want to hang out, that's good. All right, there you go.
Great. My name is Tim Nutt. I live close to the facility, and I just have a beginning intro question, which is first of all, I'm kind of blown away that the first license was in 2003, which is about 20 years ago. They keep on saying that it's been grandfathered in forever. But anyways, so do you have the exact number, or not even the exact number, a rough estimate of the number of violations that have been issued to that facility since the initial first license? And second of all, I would just like to ask you if this wasn't a renewal of the license, would Eagle ever license issue licenses for facilities such as this in the location that it is? Or are you just dealing with this notion of renewal, but if it were a new facility, it would never, ever be able to get licensed in this day and age? Which is funny that we're only talking about 20 years.
All right, team, did you guys get that? You want to take at it?
So I just looked this up because I thought you might ask this. And I only went back to 2011. So when did the license application or the renewal come in? Okay, so I didn't go back to 2008, but I went back to 2011. And I'm only talking about hazardous waste or liquid industrial byproduct, the program that I would oversee. Those violations. There's additional violations outside of our program that could be solid waste violations or air quality division violations. So I'm not accounting for those. Since 2011, there's been 23 violation notices or compliance communications. And there's been 1 ACO under the hazardous waste program. That being said, there has been, violations in the past for the air quality division, and there has also been an administrative consent order under the solid waste program in 2020. So, if you wanted the details for all the other programs, I'd have to work on that and get back to you. And then the other question, you want to answer that as far as the facility being grandfathered?
Yeah, I can answer that. So in terms of licensing a new facility in this same area, we would have to compare the proposal to what is in Rule 504 of our state rules, and verify that the zoning and everything meets the requirements, but assuming all the requirements are met, there would be no reason to, not license it.
Yeah, just follow
Maybe
up.
Tim's gonna follow, because I was gonna ask Tiana, are you, prepared to talk about any of those requirements in 504? We're talking about isolation distance, or what kinds of things would we look at?
Or in the center of downtown Detroit? How many people live close to the facility? Do you even have a number of how many people live in a 1 mile radius, or a 2 mile radius, or a 3 mile radius from the facility?
That was part of our, environmental justice screening. I do not have a copy with me at the moment. I'm not sure, Kimberly, you have that number?
Hold on, Kimberly, I gotta come up to you.
No, I don't have the number, but the screening may be on our website.
It is on the website, yep.
Just to clarify, Tiana, I want to make sure, so that Rule 504 has isolation distances, right? How far from the nearest school, how far from the nearest residence, but does it have any population metrics, you know, but how populated of an area the facility is in?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe so, I can really.
It's mostly about the,
It's distance to physical features like community, schools, hospitals, you know, that sort of thing.
There's 3 schools.
Hold on.
There's 3 schools. There's 3 schools in the 1 mile radius of that facility.
The isolation distance is nowhere near a mile though.
yeah, it's typically a couple hundred feet.
So when you think about what would be allowed if a new facility is being proposed, those are the criteria we have to compare it to.
Okay, and anybody else back here got a question? Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for reminding us. Panelists, just remember not to use acronyms. Thank you.
I think the one I heard there was ACO, which is Administrative Consent Order. That is a legal document that allows us to formally resolve violations.
Let's speak.
Okay. So an ACO is a legal document. It's like a settlement agreement that we can enter with a facility to formally resolve violations. It comes with a list of requirements of things they have to do to correct the violation, and it's usually required for a penalty.
And in terms of the EJ screen, EJ screen is the environmental justice screening tool. We currently use my EJ screen, which is the Michigan version that was created by the state. It encompasses a lot of EPA data, but also state data, like census data, air data, water data, and that's how we kind of get some of those metrics for how many schools are in a 1 mile radius of some of these facilities, you know, the types of constituents that can be found and things like that.
Okay, we do have a question right here. I'm gonna come down so you can stay good.
Okay. With regards to, you guys filing, the public crime, right? They had leakage, right? Am I correct? There was a leakage, right?
Not sure.
The tank integrity problem.
Yeah, there was a leakage. Okay.
I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear what you were saying.
Yeah, she's asking if there was a leakage at the facility.
Oh, no, I can
Elaborate on that.
Yeah, so, the incident that I was referring to when I gave my presentation in 2023, I think it's 2023, the facility was, the tanks inside the chem fix were determined to be what I call unfit, and that's, the unfit is a legal term that's used in the federal regulation, but essentially what was happening is the secondary containment wall, was not waterproof, and there was liquid accumulating in the interstitial space between the steel tank and the concrete wall. And then the company couldn't determine if it was from the tanks leaking or if it was from groundwater infiltrating the secondary containment.
Okay. But it still was a leakage, right?
Yeah, so,
It's still, there was a leakage. Okay. How does, the company, let the community know that there's something going on, they have a problem with their leadership. 9 times out of 10, 10 out of 10, you guys are going to be notified first time. But what about the people in the community, whether it's underground, on top of ground, around ground, whatever, you know? So how do they go about notifying the community? I mean, are they, calling the groups up in each community, you know what I'm saying? Then they know, say, well, okay, something happened over here, you know,
Yeah.
you guys are, how's this, you know, going about? Because first of all, with that consent agreement, okay, that's why, that came up, because there was some type of leakage going on, in which the public was not, we were not notified. As far as I know, I wasn't notified, okay? I can't speak for anyone else, but anyway, and then prior to that consent agreement, Republic, well, I didn't want to pronounce the name, they're not doing right by that anyway, in the people in the community, okay? And I'm not satisfied with that. So, how's this going? Let me know how this is going, because right now, it's, you know, if you can't trust a company in your community to be straightforward with you and this and that, well, they don't need to be licensed in your community.
Oh, okay, do you want to let, Todd, do you want to address that?
I mean, I think I can try to address it. My understanding is that.
You might get skipped up a little bit now here.
Sorry, I got technical. There you go. Here. So my understanding is that the company does have regular meetings with the community through the community host agreement. But in addition to those meetings with the company, which that's outside of, you know, Eagle's purview or jurisdiction, we did have a public meeting when the consent order was issued at the church there on Shane, is it on Shane? To discuss the consent order and what led up to that. And that was last year, I believe, in 2024. 2 years ago, sorry, 2023. But as far as the facility notifying the public if there's a release to the environment, there is a contingency plan that's attached to the license. If there's a release that's an endangerment to human health and the environment, there's a series of steps they have to go through to notify Eagle, and then they'll notify the local authorities. The local authorities would be the responsible party that would notify the community if evacuation is necessary or what actions need to be taken immediately. The issues with the tanks didn't reach that level where they were implementing the contingency plan. It was an issue that was identified through one of my inspections, and then it prompted us, Eagle, to further evaluate the tank integrity and then evaluate the hydrogeological conditions surrounding the tanks.
Okay, Sean, add on to that?
One quick thing too is, I will try to clarify, based on the information that we have, and I don't mean to correct you in any way, but, the tanks, based on the data that we've collected, and part of this has said the hydrogeologic investigation, which I apologize for that word. Hydrogeologic is really just a fancy word for groundwater and us trying to understand what's happening in the subsurface, how groundwater is moving, what could potentially be in it, et cetera. So based on the results from that hydrogeo investigation and findings from investigating the tank issues and doing that, a leak is a pretty universal word. I would compare the situation that we encountered at the facility, similar to, the only word I can think to use is hydrostatic pressure, but really, water building up around the tanks, similar to if you have, like a subsurface basement at your house. I'm sure many of us have encountered water getting into your basement as a result of like either you have either drain malfunctioning around your house or just not having one, and during heavy rain events, water can build up and start to get into our basement. That's very similar to what we encountered at the facility. And so I think one important caveat to note as well is while water was getting in what appeared to be on a daily basis, they were unbeknownst to us, but, it did work out. They were bringing in a truck every night to remove the water that would accumulate within those tanks. And I do believe that played a big part in preventing, based on the data we have, preventing a release to the environment from the tanks. Had they not been doing that, again, condoning the behavior, but, I believe we may have been dealing with maybe a different situation, but, yeah, so I would just say. I think so. Let me try this. Check. Perfect. And so just really to try to clarify that point and happy to talk more on that point and whatnot. And then, Todd expanded on notifications to the community if there's a release to the environment, et cetera. There's also, I would say, important improvements to the leak detection system itself. So, Todd would perform during his inspections prior to these tank improvements a visual inspection. And so there was a port on these walls that you could shine a light on essentially and visually look to see whether water was accumulating or not. Now that is an electronic leak detection system, excuse me, that they've installed, and that actually goes to a panel located outside of Chem Fix and has bright red lights and a visual and audible alarm. And so there are contingencies now in place for if that electronic leak detection system does go off, pulling those tanks out of use, doing a root cause analysis, and there's contingency steps laid out that I don't have memorized, but we now have procedures in place if that leak detection system indicates water in the interstitial space going in there. So I just wanted to add that point, but yeah.
Okay, Jim, you want to hold on?
If that's right, there's 3 operating tanks going on right now at that facility instead of the 6.
3 tanks right now, operating.
Yeah, so what we found from Todd's inspection, the tanks had suffered damage to them, so that's why they had to be taken out of service and were unfit for use. But what Sam was saying was that it was more that water was accumulating, we're not quite sure where yet, underneath and damaging those tanks. Now, from what we can tell, it does not appear that the tanks were being damaged from the inside and waste was getting out. So more stuff was coming in, not things coming out. But that is correct. The pressure that was building up underneath was damaging those tanks. So they had to remove the tanks, do a full inspection of the concrete. They removed several sections of concrete, replaced them, added additional materials to make it impervious, and then put some of them back in. And then they've also proposed this additional upgrade to increase the seal on the tanks and that leak detection.
Okay, I know we got it. Or next meeting.
Can I just add on to Tiana's answer there real quick? To get to your direct question about 3 versus 6, there's 6 tanks in the facility. They chose at that time to repair 3, and then through this license, it requires upgrade of all 6 tanks. If they're going to bring the additional 3 back online, they have to be repaired.
Okay, this gentleman's got a question. I know we got several over there.
How we doing? Thanks again for meeting with everybody. My name's Jack and I serve on the East Area Board, Community Board. And I'm just curious, I was curious about the improved fingerprinting. I feel like this is the second or third presentation I've been to since the fire. And each time I keep being like, Todd is probably gonna mention the fire and mention the insurance settlement that occurred as a result. And each time I'm like, oh, this seems like a missed opportunity. So I didn't know if you know the deal? I mean, that's what they told me at one of the meetings, is that there had been an insurance settlement. I'm like, that's the kind of thing that Eagle's able to request as part of this improved fingerprinting procedure. And if so, is that the kind of thing that we can make part of the public record when that occurs? I'm just surprised that we don't see the potential for legal enrichment here or malfeasance.
Okay, Todd. Yeah. So the improved printing is
Also related to, wasn't the fire related to the inspection that you did that discovered the tanks unfitness? I thought that you had mentioned it in the previous meeting, but I may be confused.
You're correct. So the fire happened at the end of.
Not the fire, folks.
Yeah.
because it went unreported. I think they just.
All right, Todd, can you try to address that? Yeah.
Sure, I'll try. The fire occurred at the end of 2022, December 2022. So that was tank 703. That tank was shut down because they were waiting for approval from Eagle to return it back to service. Part of my inspection following that fire was reviewing tank 703, and then I determined that there was water in the interstitial space in that tank, and then I evaluated all the tanks. I'm like, you have it in all these tanks. It looks like they're all unfit for use. So that's where we got to finding the tanks were unfit for use. They weren't performing their leak detection appropriately and taking the corrective actions. They just were pumping out the interstitial space like Sam described. The fingerprinting is something that they do when they accept the waste. So the improved fingerprinting methods are part of the administrative consent order, so we don't have another incident where a fire happens in the tank. Part of and just to give you an idea of what it is, so the particular incident that happened, they received a solvent waste stream, they flagged it, that it didn't meet the generator profile, and then they put it off to the side to figure out what to do with it. Then they received another shipment from the same generator, and they do screening of like 10% of the containers to assess if it meets the generator profile. And it passed, and then they started mixing all the waste, and there were some containers that were solvent waste that ignited when they were mixing. That's essentially what happened. The improved fingerprinting process has changed the percentage that they're doing and requires improvement of their lab worksheet. It's a form that they fill out where they write values that compare to the generator profile. But I think the biggest change that I would describe is the increase in the number of containers that they sampled when they were.
And to add to that, as part of the one batch that came in flagged, but the other didn't, part of the fingerprint improvements was also that if there is a case like that where something is flagged, they immediately put anything coming from that generator on hold, and they don't accept further batches until they figure out what's going on with that.
So now there's procedures implemented through their waste acceptance process. If they find a discrepant waste stream from a generator, like they originally did, it puts a hold on the processing of all waste from that generator until they can figure out and resolve the issue. What I guess what I was confused about is you were asking about insurance claims, and that's not something that's if they made an insurance claim regarding the fire, is that what you're asking about? Because that's something that would not be under my purview to ask, find out what kind of funds they got from the insurance company regarding the fire. I don't know where else I would go with that, but that's separate from the fingerprinting process and not something that would be under my review.
I only asked because that's
Hold on,
the
sorry.
situation where they accept.
Hold on. Got it. Yeah, I'm sorry, it seemed like a situation where they accepted one thing, it turned out to be something different. So my question is, how much of that paper trail can the community see? And I get it that they have already had many procedures in place, but I think what the folks here in the neighborhood are worried about are like, what happens when they have the wrong stuff there and it catches fire? So that's why I was saying, like, we didn't track down an insurance claim? I thought you would ask about that, because that seems like, otherwise it just looks like something they're not supposed to do.
Yeah, well,
I just definitely, that was part of the public record.
Yeah.
People could make available.
We definitely did ask for the root cause analysis for the fire.
Okay.
But it does not involve any funds or from the insurance claim. It's just like, what happened, what caused this, and now what are we going to do to prevent this from happening again?
They didn't see damages from the person they got it from?
So that's beyond Eagle's oversight. So I'm sure I'm sure there was litigation, there probably was litigation between the company and the generator, but we're not aware of what happened.
All right, we can maybe address that a little bit more in a minute.
I'll add one
If
thing.
you want.
I'll add one thing to that. So anytime there's an incident at the facility, these guys ask for what they call the root cause analysis, right? Tell us everything that went into that tank, how much of it, where it came from, and they review all the paperwork. If we find that the generator that sent that material to a disposal facility is a Michigan generator and they did something wrong in that process, we then also start looking at that generator. Sometimes this ends up being an out-of-state waste and we have to coordinate with another state agency. The insurance piece does not come into play for us, but we do look very carefully at the mix of waste that go in those tanks anytime there's any kind of incident.
Do you want to, Tracy, do you want to go with these guys? I know it's information.
I guess a couple questions since, could you be more clear on what the notification requirements are by the company? I hear things like 24-hour notice for public meetings, or I don't know anything about their requirements for notifying the community and who constitutes that community, in terms of what Eagle requires for communicating with us generally. They do hold meetings, but they're very few and far between. So you didn't really answer the question that she asked, and I'd really like you to be explicit about that. Also, sort of a little bit related to Jack, I feel like that fire precipitated your attention to this company, and it was however many months later that you figured out that there was a leak. I'm kind of stunned that the leak wasn't found before the fire, so like, where did Eagle drop the ball on that? That's something that concerns me. Yeah, that's where, yeah.
So we want to talk about notification to the community and detection of the leak. Is that right? Do you guys want to take the first one, or do you want me to? Okay.
Yeah, I'll do the notification and then I'll pass it to Todd for the leak stuff. So in terms of conversations that they have to have, if something is found, a spill happens or anything like that, that's all outlined in the contingency plan. They have 24 hours to notify us of anything. But if it's, a severe emergency, like a fire spreading to the entire neighborhood kind of thing, they have to immediately notify us and the fire department. At that point, the fire department, the police are the people who determine who to go to in the area, and it specifies in the contingency plan, at what point they have to go door to door, at what point, they're just checking to make sure people are okay and containing and then dealing with it. So all those kind of, what ifs are outlined in that.
Thing about notification. Okay, so I want us to think about notification in a couple different ways. I'm just trying to get away from the speaker. Notification of emergencies is something very different than notification about upcoming meetings and things like that. In any community with any kind of facility, we never are going to rely on a private company to notify neighbors that any sort of emergency has happened and they need to take an action. That decision is always the responsibility of the fire department. So if that is a hazardous waste facility that has an incident, if it is a gas station that has an incident, if it's a transportation accident that requires people to shelter in place, whatever that is, you will always hear from your fire department if you have to do something. Okay, so if you have to shelter in place, if you have to evacuate, our system is not set up so that you will ever have to wait to hear from our public services that you should do a thing. Okay, so that is always coming from your local first responders. In terms of your question about notifications for community meetings and things like that, arrangements they have made with the city or the community to hold those meetings are not a part of their license. And so we cannot, through our license action, assess whether or not that's adequate, whether or not community relations are good enough, or whether or not efforts are strong enough, or notice is well made, or anything like that. All right, Todd, do you want to talk about how the tank issue played out?
Sure, I can try. So the facility has, inspection requirements that are attached to their license. And there's, for each tank system, there's like a checklist that they have to go through daily anytime there's hazardous waste in the tank to assess that it's operating properly and that it's fit for use. What was happening is those inspection forms were not being filled out properly by the facility. And I can't speak to what happened previously for me, previous to my time as the Eagle inspector for the facility, but I came on board about 2021. And it took me a while to figure out what was happening here. So I don't have a good answer of why it took so long or how long it went on for, but there was an issue with the inspection records. And that was addressed as part of the administrative consent order, an improvement in the inspection records. And then in addition, the better leak detection system. The previous system, I'll be honest with you, it was cumbersome at best. So this giant steel plate they had to lift off. It's like you're hanging over an edge to a 10-foot drop into a hazardous waste pit. It was not probably done as well as it should have been by the facility. And with the new system they put in place, hopefully that will be corrected.
There's one follow-up question.
So how much of your measure of compliance still relies on self-reporting by the company that dropped the ball on that as well?
And that's a good question. So a big part of the facility operation, because I can't be there every day or every, I'm going there once a quarter. We're spread out pretty thin in this department. There is some self-implementing inspection requirements. My role is to check and assess that they're doing the inspections properly and catching the issues when they're there. So it's pretty easy, like for something that's blatant, like crumbling concrete and the containment's falling apart, that's easy to identify. This was one that was, literally hidden beneath the surface in a difficult environment to inspect. The chemical fixation building, when I go in there, it's a dusty environment. They're wearing a full face respirator. There's heavy equipment there. I don't know what to say then other than it was difficult and it was overlooked for some time.
I want to add one thing and then I'm going to get you, I promise. I completely understand this question. We get it a lot, right? Like, why do these companies have to report themselves, right? Why are they doing their own sampling? What I'll tell you is this is consistent across every environmental regulation, state and federal, right? So if you are a sewage treatment plant, right, like the Detroit wastewater treatment plant, they treat the wastewater, the water they put in the river, they sample it every day, every hour, on some frequency, once a year, a couple times a year. The department comes and double checks that, right? And so all of our statutory environmental programs are set up with a combination of self-monitoring and self-reporting, and then the department basically constructs the guidelines. We construct the permit that says you have to operate this way, you have to monitor the environment this way, you have to keep these records and report these things, and then we come on some frequency to check. Sometimes that frequency is specified in law, sometimes we determine that frequency based on the size or the kind of operations, but it is not uncommon to, it's not special to this facility, it's not special to this industry, it's across the board. Tim, I see you have a follow-up question that this guy's been waiting really patiently. Do you guys want to?
Well, just what you said about just the.
All right, follow up here.
Can I just add one thing, Tracy?
Please.
And I didn't touch on this. All of the inspections that when I do them are unannounced. So we're not telling them 2 weeks in advance, hey, here I come, fix it all up and hide everything so I don't see it. It's like I show up and I'm like, here I am, let's do this. So the idea of the program is to catch them in their normal daily operations and assess how well they're operating.
I just wanted to The comparison you made between Republic Services and GLEWA is a little unfair, I'd say, because GLEWA is a public utility, and Republic Services is a private, huge company that is beholden to shareholders, and the only thing they care about is money. So-
Sure, I will, fair point, but I'm saying that we can use that example, we can use a steel mill, we can use a paper mill, we can use a power plant, we can use, I mean, any one of these facilities. And I promise you, as Eagle regulators, we have found problems with public utilities, with public drinking water plants, right? We all know that we go in, some of the places we regulate are publicly owned, some of them are privately owned. They're all regulated the same way. The department has a history of enforcement actions with GLEWA, with water systems. I mean, I get the point, right? And so maybe there's a sense that there is more transparency or accountability with a public entity, but they're regulated the same way. They hold the same kind of permits. Okay, I'm getting to you.
Adam Burville, I live in the neighborhood with that facility. I just was wondering, well, I had a couple of quick technical questions about the permit and then maybe a broader question. There was mention that they were pumping the water that was infiltrating the concrete vaults. Were they pumping it and putting it into trucks and taking it off-site, or were they pumping it and taking it through the wastewater treatment facility on site?
Yeah, my understanding is that it was being pumped with a back truck and then just transported to the on-site. They call it the chem-free building, but that's essentially their wastewater treatment facility.
Okay, so I mean, based on that kind of behavior, is there ever kind of a metric of like, this is a customer that is acting in bad faith? How many strikes do they get where they're like openly flaunting the law and just kind of freewheeling before enforcement? Or is it just kind of violations? It's like a simplified language, like this is a violation and that's not.
So we have a EPA guidance policy that defines what a significant non-complier is. And there's a metric system based on, different variables of how severe when we would take enforcement. The scenario with the fire and the leaking tanks obviously met the significant non-complier status. That's why we pursued enforcement. When I talked earlier about a compliance communication that we could just resolve informally without penalties and I'm talking something very minor, like me walking by a drum and the labeling is, there's no label on it. I'm like, okay, you need to have labels on your drums, and fix it right now, and they slap a label on. But if that's recurring, then we're gonna escalate it. That's part of the significant non-complier policy. So, I mean, I guess that's just a taste of it. There's some judgment call in that. There is some interpretation with the policy. Typically that goes through our enforcement staff. They work with me to figure out what level we're at. But, the particular instances and the multiple issues resulted in what we had last year with the consent order.
Okay. My next question is, I believe at the last meeting, when you guys all came out and kind of explained the consent order, I feel like there was talk that issues surrounding the consent order would need to be resolved prior to the renewal of the permit. And as we're now entering kind of the final stages of the permit renewal, there's several components of the consent order that are still unresolved. When did that calculation change, and why can the community not get the results of the odor feasibility study that was completed? And as a final kind of question in relation to the permit renewal, if we're basing their permit renewal on their operations with 3 tanks, and then upon their permit renewal, they're gonna replace 3 and go to 6, why would we assume that the results are gonna be anything different than what we had 5 years ago when they had continuous violations of various types at the facility due to the scale of their operation? which is significantly smaller currently as they go through this permit renewal. And then immediately upon renewing their permit, their operations will expand dramatically. And I mean, you laid it out really well in your presentation, Tiana. So when did the calculation change about the consent order being completely resolved? And then are we basing their compliance on completely like hypothetical? Is this all modeling based on?
No, so their current compliance status is based on the most recent inspection. So the last 2 inspections I've done, they've been in compliance. There were 2 compliance issues previous to that were resolved, so it didn't meet the level of like going through an enforcement action. And then the previous inspections beyond that, they were also in compliance. So, you know, my position is that the issues that resulted in the consent order have been addressed. They did submit a odor feasibility study to us in January of this year. I just double checked before we came here. It sounds like there shouldn't be any problem for us to provide that or post that on our website. They did have to submit that as part of the consent order and provided that to us. We met with them and discussed the results of that study. And then there's some actions that they have put in that feasibility study that they are planning to implement. I'll let Tiana talk to you about the tank permitting.
Yeah, so I have the odor feasibility in my notes to get that uploaded to the website, as soon as I get back to Lansing. In terms of the tanks, like I did say, so the 3 tanks that are currently in use are 702, 703, and 704. And those are the 3 largest tanks. So, like I said, all 6 have a total capacity of 430,000 gallons. Those 3 alone make up 300,000 gallons. So the remaining 3 tanks that need to be replaced are relatively small. They're only 40, 30, and 50,000 gallons. So a lot smaller. So it's not going to be this dramatic doubling, tripling of operations. They're currently operating at 70% capacity. What was the second part of your question?
I have something.
Well, just in relation to the consent order, if like in particular, look, I know you guys, it's not your purview, but the SCP process is still playing out.
Yep.
There is multiple other kind of things in the air still that are unresolved with the company, and so I am confused as to why Eagle's moving forward with the permit renewal while those things are still.
So, yeah, I think I get what you're saying. One thing we didn't touch upon with the consent order and like ongoing compliance with the facility. For all the issues that were identified as part of the consent order, you know, the fire, the fingerprinting, the leaking tanks, the consent order has stipulated penalties built into the order. So if there's repeat issues, if they begin operation again, we can go back and now it's just, you're paying fines based on, you know, recurring violations that are already called out in the order.
So I want to add something about the SEP, or what we call the Supplemental Environmental Project, right? So the consent order came with a penalty, just over $900,000. That money is put into an escrow account. They have the option, an SEP is not required, so they have the option to either just pay the penalty to the state or to complete an SEP. Normally, an SEP is supposed to be agreed upon before we enter the consent order, but we wanted to make sure that there was enough time to really like flush out an SEP and get the community input. And so we agreed on this strategy where they would put the penalty in escrow and then take the time to develop it. At any time, Republicans say, forget the SEP, here's your money, state of Michigan. The SEP is optional, right? So that's why the SEP does not have to be settled on before we issue the license, okay? It is our, it is our belief that that money is far better invested into the community than to go into the state general fund. And our impression is that Republic is committed to following through on the SCP process. I just want to be really clear that it's not required as a part of the consent order, it's an option. I do want to let Jim jump over here, because we've had a bunch of this lady right here.
Yeah.
Question, I'll do that.
Thank you. Here you go.
Answering.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tiana.
Yeah, sorry, I never finished answering his question, about the consent order. But yeah, so like Tracy was saying, back when we did our last discussion in 2023, the part that has to be resolved before the license can be issued is all these violations. The facility can't have any open violations, before a license is issued. They all have to be resolved. So Todd's inspection last week, if he found something, any violations from that would have prevented this license from being issued.
But how do you know that they're not gonna have violations when they scale up? This is like, is this based on modeling, or is this, how do we know as they scale?
There's no way to predict, they have to comply with their license. So there's no prediction model or anything that they're gonna comply, it's just thou shalt comply with the license and I will evaluate compliance.
And in terms of the scale up, so like I said, they're returning the 6 tanks to operations that you guys have experienced before. But these new tanks that are gonna be put in, they're replacing all 6 tanks. And because of the additional steel that they're adding, they're also gonna add extra concrete, and that sloping, the tanks are actually all gonna be reduced in size. So the overall capacity of treatment at this facility, and storage in those tanks is going to go down. We don't have an exact number yet, because that's based on like the as-built data, but it will definitely be decreasing.
So, I want to speak to the SCP. There are several issues surrounding the SCP. The community was told one thing. We come to find out later on down the line that they have changed everything around that they were saying that they were going to do with this funds. While I do understand that it is a voluntary process, with them doing that, it has corroded the trust of the community. If we cannot trust this corporation to do what they are saying that they're going to do to be a quote unquote good neighbor to the community, how can we trust that they will move forward with these different processes and comply? As he was saying, the documentation that they were doing, it sounded like he said it was falsified with the inspections. But if we can't trust that they will come in and tell us, oh, we're gonna be a good neighbor, we're gonna come in and we're gonna give this money to the neighborhood and fix up houses and do all these things, and then turn around and now you have a whole new program where most of the people won't even qualify to get the funds. How can we trust that this corporation will do what they should in their daily operations and keep our lives safe and not in jeopardy while they're processing these hazardous waste?
And part of the reason the step is still ongoing is for that very reason. We heard that the community had significant concern, different stories were floating around, so we paused a lot of our review. We're not currently reviewing that proposal, and we actually told Republic Services to come back to the community and fix that issue, fix that trust issue, and come to an agreement between what they proposed to us and what they were telling to you. So we're currently not reviewing this step. We're waiting for a new proposal to come through.
I'm sorry, can I clarify one thing? I'm sorry, I just want to clarify something Tiana said there, okay, because my understanding was a bit different. Okay? I understand that Republic had community feedback on their plan. Republic came to us and said, we have some things to work out with the community. We would like you to pause review of the SCP until we work this out. So we are not party to the community engagement piece with Republic and the development of the plan. When the plan comes to us, we will evaluate if it meets the requirements And that is mostly in terms of like, the credit and the value of the project and whether or not it will count toward all of their penalty. But it doesn't necessarily get at the, whether or not everyone in the community is satisfied with the project. I understand that many proposals were submitted as to what the project could be. There was some feedback given. Republic has communicated to us that they are working on evaluating that, and they will let us know if they're going to make any changes to their proposal, and then we can then at that point evaluate it.
Okay, she's got a follow-up real quick.
So why isn't this being considered in the renewal of their license? If the community is not trusting in this corporation to do as they have said they would do, why would we want you to renew a license for a corporation like this to function within our community?
I completely understand the question. Fundamentally, it's because the SEP is optional, right? At any point, we could say, we don't think this proposal is worthwhile, just give us the money, right? We could deny their SEP, we could say, go back to the community, find something better. The SEP is completely optional. It is a way for a penalty that resulted from these violations to go back into the community instead of just to the state.
Come right here.
Just to clarify about the money, the state of Michigan already has the money. The company isn't holding on to this $1 million. It's in the state of Michigan's hands to hold on to it. So if at any point Republic was unable to continue along with this process, we have the control. We already have it. We're not waiting for them to write us a check or anything like that.
Okay,
I think the point that we are saying is that Republic is not being very upfront and honest with us. Some of the things y'all saying at the meeting, I have talked to Republic. We are one of the groups in that community, and we are very unhappy with what Republic have been doing and what they've been saying. We are feeling that they're telling you guys one thing and telling us another thing. Far as this SEP, those are grassroots programs. Those are grassroots things and ideas. We had no idea that Republic was going to come and try to replace our program and have us work for them and bring in Habitat of Humanity and talk to anyone in our community. I thought these funds was for to better the community and fix some things within the community, but it seems like it was a Republic took it to be a weaponized to dismantle or to try to control our community. And let's get one thing straight. $927,000 is not a lot of money, to be perfectly honest. So we just found it very ingenuous for Republic to be already in the heat they're in to try to pull one of these numbers. Because we fought for Republic to try to work out a deal when they wanted to just coldly shut them down. And for them to come and do something like this in our community and slap us in our face and tell us something, we know nothing about any of this thing. I talked to Pete, I talked to Winston, I talked to them all. And we're not getting this. And I'm finding it very discreditable that you guys can talk to us and always say how we miscommunicate, and y'all have this type of information, and y'all didn't communicate that y'all put y'all haven't called us and talked to us. So why would we want y'all to be doing business in our community when y'all already in the hole, and then y'all coming over here to do tactics like this to disrespect our residents in our community?
You guys want to address the SEP process more, or Tracy or the team up front?
I don't know that there's more I can add to it. Our evaluation of a supplemental environmental project tends to be whether or not the project that's being proposed has value to the community and any connection to the set of violations. Okay, so in order to let that sort of get developed, that's why we said put the penalty in escrow, work on a project, come to us with a proposal. So our enforcement people, they're the ones that look and decide whether or not the value of the project meets the value of the penalty. Sometimes we'll say, okay, a given project, you get 50% credit or something like that, right? So our evaluation is not done. I saw the communication that Republic sent to the community group that said after the meeting, it was some kind of email or newsletter, right, that said, you know, we held this meeting and the development of the SEP is on pause. So that is where we are with it. We are not currently reviewing the SEP until we understand that Republic has worked out or redeveloped the SEP in accordance with the community. We've got some follow-up questions here, but has anyone who's not asked a question yet got a question before this gentleman? If you don't, I'm just gonna go to someone who hasn't asked a question yet.
And Matt, I'll check, is there anyone online who's got a question?
We've got one.
Okay, but.
Thank you. I'm totally unfamiliar with the situation, but I applaud the involvement of the local population. I'm involved in another deal that is much less important, but it has the same issues. My background is I worked for an industrial insurance company all my life, and I retired as a vice president. I have experience in loss prevention, insurance, claims, things of that nature. I really can only give you some advice because I really don't understand all the details. But the people, you have to look at the people who have a stake who have skin in the game. Eagle does not have skin in the game. Okay, you have skin in the game because you have exposure. The other entities that have a skin in the game are the property insurance company of the owner of the building and also the liability insurance carrier. I would strongly suggest that you try to obtain information from these organizations because they are the experts. They know exactly what took place. I tell you, because they are. So this is something that I have done in my case, and it was just an eye-opening experience. I FOIA'd the inspections from the property insurance company, the inspections from the liability insurance company. They resisted releasing them, but they were eye-opening, fraud to the highest degree. I would strongly suggest that you obtain all the information that you can get your hands on from the engineers who inspected the facility that are responsible to the insurance company, okay? Because they're going to pay, okay? The question is, how much liability insurance do they have? Do they have any? Does the Republic have any liability insurance? To what limit? Do they carry on any property insurance? That's the issue. And I think Eagle should be responsible to check this out because you say, well, that's not our city, that is not our, no. You need to get involved in this. That's all I want to say. I know very little about the services.
So let me just, so is your question, does Eagle know about how much liability insurance they have, or?
Absolutely, absolutely.
You can make a comment for our comment.
So Tiana's gonna talk about the financial assurance of the company, and then I'll come back up here.
We also have a question online here, Tracy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, let's talk about financial assurance and then go to online.
Yeah, so the facility has financial assurance in case Republic were to be unable to fulfill their obligations, something happens. They have financial assurance for closure and for, like you're saying, the liability company for the physical property. So the closure money, all of this money is already in existence for closure. It's upwards of $1 million. It's already in a bond. We have it in our offices. And that money is to ensure that if something were to happen, the facility can be properly closed. You know, all the waste that's already on site can be removed, those tanks dismantled, sampling be done to ensure that the facility can be reused. Yeah, and this is all part of the license requirements. We're adding a condition for corrective action as well to continue work to investigate PFAS, things like that. And then they are required by law to have financial assurance for their liability company for the physical property, either for any spills that were to occur, anything like that. I think at this point it's $8 million. I'd have to double check though. But it is available on our website, but they do have those insurance. They have it both for accidental things that happen, or for non-sudden events that occur.
Hey, Tiana, you said that's available for the public to view. Is that online, and where can they find it? Is it like part of the draft application, draft permit, or?
That's available, that's available on our waste data system. We have all of the information, about compliance inspections, the violations Todd has found, all the financial assurance, like, dollar amounts, things like that. That's all available on our website, on the waste data system. You just have to type in the EPA ID.
I'll just add, if you do use the waste data system, it's an antiquated system and somewhat difficult to use. So, take that for what it's worth, but it is there. And if you had problems accessing it, you could give one of us a call and we'll hold your hand and walk you through it. But I'm just giving you a warning. It's difficult for us to use and probably even more difficult for the public to use.
Yeah, that sounds complicated. So they can call that phone number up there or that email address that you've got listed?
Yeah, you can call me. I would send it to the Hazardous email box.
Oh, but your email.
Yeah, you can email or call me. I have business cards or
Yeah.
that one for Todd, but I'd be happy to help you look at the waste data system. It's a very useful tool. That's part of what we try to do to make things transparent.
Okay, thank you. So team, we do have a question from someone that's online. It's kind of long, so I'm going to read it how it's posted here. It says, the draft OL fact sheet says, the facility does not currently present a hazard to public health or the environment. This conclusion is based on a waiver granted to US ADS by Eagle to forego soil monitoring. A consent order requiring the proposal of a groundwater monitoring well system. How can a waiver exempting soil monitoring and a requirement for a proposal of groundwater monitoring establish there is no hazard?
Yeah, so I can, sorry about that, I can speak to that a little bit. And so from the perspective of what requires a soil monitoring program within the license is, one of the main condition that we look at is the storage and treatment of hazardous waste take place either indoors within, I can't remember the requirements exactly, indoors, secondary containment, or concrete. There are areas where waste is handled at the facility, paved or concrete. Basically, you don't have waste or barrels sitting on bare soil. So that is a condition that as long as you meet those requirements, then we can grant a waiver for the soil monitoring program. I hope that answers the groundwater monitoring side of things. So as you mentioned, yes, there was a groundwater monitoring waiver granted back in 2003 during the last license issuance. And that was based on not only historical groundwater investigations that took place from the mid to late 80s through the 90s, kind of trying to understand subsurface presence of groundwater at the site, potential for a spill to make it to an aquifer or a body of water within the subsurface. And so based on those investigations and the demonstration municipality had made at the time, as well as the waste, like I mentioned earlier, meeting the requirements for waste where it's treated, where it's stored, those waivers were granted. And so, but as a result of the administrative consent order, US Ecology going forward and combination of the requirement in the administrative consent order and the hydrogeologic or groundwater investigations we've conducted at the site, we are going to be reviewing a groundwater monitoring program, and they'll be required to implement groundwater monitoring at the site going forward. So I hope that answers the question, but I'm happy to clarify further if need be.
Okay, go back over there, Tracy. Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, I have two questions. I thought it was interesting that the gentleman in the front brought up the insurance question. Because I actually have a question for Republic Services because they're in the room. How much of the fine or was the fine paid through an insurance coverage, maybe a legal liability coverage, versus just suffering your profits I understand you may not be able to answer that question, but I think that's a question worth answering. And then the other one I think that is really important to clarify that I feel like we've heard a few times but hasn't been explicitly stated is that it sounds to me like the licensing approval does not consider community sentiment, community feelings about the organization, or how well they engage or communicate with us. That it's not really part of the calculation, which makes it feel like this entire meeting is pointless, but that tends to be the way these things go. The community will voice problem after problem after problem, but the companies are meeting their technical requirements. So, for instance, I can report an emission that's 5 minutes long based on a video that I've sent to a legal person. And they come out and they say, well, it didn't meet the 80%, opacity. And even though they do it every 6 minutes, they meet those individual requirements, and there's no cumulative effects, there's no cumulative impacts on health that's monitored. And so we have no ability as a community to really influence what you guys decide, because it's all buttons, calculations, policy code, ordinances, blah, 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 that have nothing to do with our lived experiences. So what are we gonna get out of these community comment? What is this really gonna result in? Because it happens over and over again that we see thousands of people saying, we don't want this here. And your only ability is based in legal requirements that they've met and checked the boxes, and we have no other way but to approve it. It's not fair. I just don't get it.
I can address that if you'd like to.
Well, I got it. So I do want to say that, that is not the case. I received a paper from somebody about, some concerns the coalition has, one of which is, about excavators being stored outside. That is a comment we're planning on taking back. Things like that, that's not something that should be happening. If it's covered in hazardous waste dust or reagent, that should not be happening. We're planning on taking that back and maybe adding a condition to the license specifying that, because that's not something we were aware of. So we listen, we take those into consideration. So please keep commenting, please reach out to us. It does matter to us. We do have stake in the game, we have family, friends. We don't go into environmental work just because we do it because we care about the environment, we care about the people living in the area, we have friends living in the area. I do.
I want to add one thing to what Tiana said here. And I agree with her completely. But there is an accuracy to what you said. There are certain kinds of comments that we can legally consider, and there are certain kinds of comments that we legally can't, right? So the way that environmental laws are written, they say, Eagle shall issue a permit to an applicant if the following conditions are met. It does not give weight to popularity of a facility or trust in a facility, right? And so I absolutely understand the frustration. I've attended hundreds of these meetings, right? For these kinds of facilities, landfills, air permits. I understand the sentiment. The reality is that land use decisions are local, right? So if a facility is zoned, and those are local decisions by the city, if an area is zoned industrial, then a facility can exist there. Our responsibility under the law is to ensure that these facilities meet the requirements, right? So the law lays out the guidelines for how these facilities coexist in our society, right? That's what the law did, right? It said, you shall give them a license and they shall do these things, right? And if they can do those things, we are required to issue the license. We are not able, just like in an air permit hearing, we are not able to say, well, this license is wildly unpopular and the community has tired of them being there, so we are going to deny the license. We would have to prove to a judge that a facility cannot comply with the law before we could deny a license. I'm gonna go here. Was there someone on the other side?
Tiana, I just want to applaud you for expressing your idealism in coming to this profession. And I want to say I respect all you guys. I'm not here to hold your feet to the fire. When I was reading the submittals for the permit renewal though, you know, like all of these claims that the company makes in their permit renewal have to be signed on to by environmental engineers, geologists, many people that have the same credentials that you do sitting at the table are working for consulting firms and are working for these companies and are cashing their checks and are sending recommendations that facilities should be open and running and whatever. So pardon our skepticism. You know, not everyone who goes into environmental science is doing it because they care about the environment. And in this case, you know, I mean, this meeting, I hate to jump on to her point, but it's a political issue that we face, and you guys are technocrats, and you have a place in this system, and as we're going through this meeting, it's becoming painfully clear how little power you have to actually regulate the operations of facilities like these. Republic Services is based in Phoenix, Arizona, US Ecology in Boise, Idaho. They grossed over $1 billion the last year before they were bought by Republic, and Republic is currently a $16 to $17 billion a year industry. We need to have political leadership from our local leaders and from our state leaders to create an environment where you guys are empowered to actually regulate these industries. And I understand that through staffing and through the letter of the law, we don't always have the power to do that in these cases. But, you know, these guys are bad actors and they have very deep pockets, and I'm committed to working all political angles to make this a very difficult process for them. And thank you for having the meeting.
Speaking of their public services and outreach, and for example, let's talk about this meeting. How do we all get here? How do we hear about this meeting? And why are there so few people here? You know, I heard about it through Adam, that somehow luckily got on the Eagle newsletter and heard about it. I told a lot of people here. No one knew about it. We had a meeting with the Public Services a week or two ago. They didn't even mention it. Right. We went to so many meetings with you guys. You have all our email addresses. You know all our community. You haven't sent a single email out to any of us. Of course, you can say, oh, it was in our newsletter. That's all. That's legally what we're required to do. Anyway, there's one last question that I have is I was actually trying to look for the old license and the license you're proposing, and I can't find it. Is it on the website? Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the website. I can help you.
Tiana, would it be useful? I mean, I don't know if we've got a lot more questions. I wonder if it would be useful if Tiana showed us online where to find that. Kimberly or Elizabeth, can either of you speak to whether or not so we try to public notice meetings like this in several ways, because we know that not everybody reads one way or another, right? So we put it in the newspaper because that's what we're legally required to do, but we know nobody finds these things in a newspaper, and so we do these other things, right? We send out a press release, we send out a newsletter, that sort of thing. I was under the impression that the system we use is called Gov Delivery. That's how we send out our emails. That everybody who has signed up for our mailing list gets those emails.
So I received notice for this meeting, but it was because I had been poking around on the Eagles website and I had gone to this specific facility and signed up for notifications specific to this facility. It was never included in any broader newsletter or broader delivery email notifying people. It was totally random.
So what we try to do is we have a mailing list for each of our licensed facilities. So if you live in Belleville and you're interested in the landfill versus if you live in Midland and you're interested in Dow, you sign up for what you're interested in, and those alerts are supposed to go to those email addresses. Tim, we can absolutely make sure you're on it, and anyone else who signed in, we will make sure it gets added to the newsletter. Tiana mentioned this earlier. Tonight, we're considering like an informal information session. By law, what we're required to do is a public hearing, and those are the sort of like old school meetings where we sit here and you make your comment and we're not allowed to respond to you. So the next meeting will be a little more like that. So on September 4th, the meeting we're gonna have right across the street will be a little bit of question and answer, just in case there are new things. And then it will be very formal, and you'll say your comments and they'll sit there and like hold their tongue, right? That's the legal piece. This is the meeting we do because we know it's more effective, right? We would rather, I mean, I find you guys to be the most well-informed community that we deal with on any of our facilities. And so we would rather be here with you for 2-3 hours and answer all of these questions than do one of those formal hearings. But that's the piece we're required to do. But we will do everything we can to make sure that the people that care about what goes on in this facility is aware of the work that we're doing.
Right.
Yes, Tiana was gonna show us on the website where to find the license, maybe even where to find that financial assurance information.
Oh, I can do that too. Yes, so this is our Hazardous website. You
How'd you
go
get
down-
there?
But you can also type in michigan.gov/Ecology Detroit South, like I have here. We made a shortcut for it. So if you go there, it will take you to the webpage for this specific facility. And if you go down here, license and renewal information, and click on that. Sorry?
So if you picked up the document at the table, the EQ Detroit fact sheet, it's a couple pages. On page 5, it's got the link there, michigan.gov/Ecology Detroit South, just in case you don't remember.
It's the same website like that I had on my slide earlier. If you have any questions, like I said, I have business cards, I can send it to you after the fact. But under here, if you clicked on that link that says license and renewal, that's where you'll find it. So this is the draft license. These are the attachments that are pretty big, which is why they had to be broken apart. And then right here is that existing operating license with the note about the 2004 transfer.
Tiana, do I remember correctly that the draft license is also at the local public library and at our office? Is it in Warren or Detroit? Warren, okay, but it's at the public library on Woodward?
Yeah,
the main
branch.
branch? Okay. If you want a paper copy.
Yep, we have a repository there, and they told us that they're keeping all of that for their records. So the documents from like our 2023 meeting, for example, are also there. And then if you want to sign up for the mailing list, we're already taking everyone that came in, the emails that we received there, we're adding that to the mailing list, so you'll get notified. But kind of like Adam was saying, if you wanted to sign up for other facilities, right at the bottom of the page, on all of the pages at the bottom, it says complete this form, and you click on that and you can sign up for every hazardous waste facility or all of the MMD specific ones or just this one. But we are, if you're here tonight, we're already planning on adding to that. And then in terms of do you want me to show the financial?
Would it be useful to folks? Do you want to see what's the insurance information, the financial assurance information? Why don't we take this question while you navigate there? Okay.
And for those people that are online, maybe Tiana and everyone here, we have your email addresses. We can send you an email that'll have these links. That's something easy for us to do. And I appreciate that comment on outreach. That means a lot, and that's something we can improve on. So, online audience, you're probably not following along with this, but we can send the link to people that logged in online.
So yeah, if you just go to Google and type in waste data system, it'll say welcome to Eagle's waste data system. You do have to know either the MID or the WIDS number. opinion.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, you could do the address as well, that's true. Oh, I guess you could. So you just type in EQ Detroit and it'll come up. Like I said, it's a really useful tool. We try to update this all the time. So it has, it's not only has waste, it also has solid waste information. Let's do a quick peek. It has all of the compliance information from Todd's inspections, you know, violations. There's a whole tab for the violations, things like that. If you go to permitting and corrective action, that's where you'll find some of that financial information, about the liability insurance.
Do you have any odor complaints on that?
No, this is, MMD specific, it's not tied in with air quality stuff. I think air quality runs on a different system. I don't remember.
So odor complaints, John Lamb, you could probably explain to him how to find that, but maybe that's something we can do afterwards. If that's okay. Unless you wanna. So for odor complaints for air quality, we have a different database. It's MyEnviro, MIENVIRO. And you just look up the facility and the odor complaints should be all in there. And again, that's something we can add to an email. It actually be more of the, I'm trying to think, sorry, there's a new database for us. We just started it a few months ago. I think a lot of the actual odor complaints are considered confidential because they have people's addresses and other information. So the complaints themselves may not be on there, but the complaint investigations will be.
Okay. Curious, I think, John, you said that there's 12 complaints to date this year?
Something like, I think something like 12 they got assigned to US Ecology. That's a ballpark figure. It could be off by a couple one. There hasn't been a lot of complaints this year.
Yeah, so exactly, that's we want to hear from you guys to make sure that those things are being locked and things like that. But in terms of the financial assurance, this is kind of what you see here. So I was wrong. Closure, they have roughly $2.2 million for closure. So if Republic can't close the site, something happens, we have the money to pay for it. Republic had to put all this money up front. We hold on to it. But the idea of financial insurance in general is that the taxpayers shouldn't have to pay to clean up these sites if something happens with the facility. The money is here. We collect the money from them. We create cost estimates detailing based on how much waste they can hold on site. It'll roughly cost XYZ amount, and this gets adjusted for inflation annually. So this money's already existed, like we already have it in a bond at our site. So it's not like we're banking on the company's profits or anything. Like it's already capped by the state of Michigan. It's something we're similar with the insurance policy. It's worth $8 million for that liability insurance.
And just to add on to that, I mean, we do this for any kind of licensed facility. So a landfill, any other hazardous waste facilities, they have to calculate site-specific costs for closure and then provide that money in some sort of financial instrument before they get a license. You know, if you don't mind, oh, actually, the question here and then here.
Yeah, okay, hold on. Come over there.
Find out about that liability insurance. You all have that on you all, but what about the people in the neighborhood in case something happens to them? Do they have to go to the insurance company or come, or you all have to pay them or take care of them while they sick or something?
If there are damages from a private property owner to another private property owner, that is a matter, you know, that's like a dispute between the homeowner and Republic. So if there was, you know, it's just like if you were in some sort of accident, right? You know, if something happened to your property caused by anyone else, you would pursue that with them. That's how that goes.
That is what
You said you had a leakage. Now that leakage could have put stuff in the neighborhood, could have caused other people to get sick. So do that insurance take care of them with that, or
Tiana, do you have something you want to add to that?
Yeah, so this liability insurance policy that they have, that would cover kind of, I think, what you're describing. Like, it's called like pollution legal liability insurance for if they cause widespread contamination to the community and something like that. Like, that's what the policy is for. And it's required by law. So there's $8 million in that. Should,
But I'll just add, when there was the tank issue, right, when we found that groundwater was coming, we say leakage, but I don't want you to picture it as like a big above ground tank that was leaking hazardous waste down into the environment. It was that underground tank that Sam described as being like a basement, and groundwater was leaking into it. But we didn't know that at first. We just knew there was water, and we didn't know what the problem was. So that's why we said, stop everything you're doing and investigate this. They did not use this money for that investigation. They were on the hook for that. This is in case we have to come in and do this work.
Or is it the case someone from the community makes you liable? Or
Makes the state liable?
legal liable?
That is not what this money is for.
if you looked on our website, in that same area, there were templates for all of these financial documents that, would specify exactly what the conditions are, how the money can be used. If you go back to that hazardous waste page, all the templates are used right there, and that language was reviewed by the Attorney General. Even if, sites use different banks, they're required to keep that same template language. So if you're curious about how the money can be used for those different mechanisms that are available, I would definitely check that out, and it was on this page. If you go back to our main page, under financial responsibility, and look at these for liability coverage or closure, post-closure, you can see exactly what language we're requiring from the banks and how that money can be used.
Before we go any further, I just want to make a time check. We're at 8:05 right now, and we do have interpreters that work online, so the interpreters are probably going to be signing off because we only have them until 8 o'clock. We have to be out of this building. We've gone by 8:30. So that's what we've been told. So maybe we take a couple more questions and then we can hang around for a little while. So as we look forward to the public hearing and comment on September 4th, how much latitude do you guys have to impose requirements that exceed how is it structured for hazardous waste? Like, this facility obviously is interacting with the air division, with the hazardous waste division. Do you guys, as regulators, have room to impose requirements that go beyond the letter of the law as we go through this renewal process? So I'm kind of trying to think about, as we plan for this next meeting, like in the SCP process, for example, the coalition, which I'm a part of, proposed, a more robust air monitoring regimen, for example. Are those the type of things that are going to be considered? And do you guys have the power to impose those on the company? Or is this something where, like, depending on the size of the company and what they do, there's very clear rules for what can be imposed?
Sorry, I wanted to move over here, because it felt weird being behind like the podium, but, so doing something like that, broad scale, anything like that would be called omnibus authority. And we try to be very careful about that, we don't want to be seen like we're just requiring everybody to do everything just because we want to willy-nilly without any reasoning. Especially in terms of the air that you mentioned, we are absolutely taking that into consideration. So currently, so the new station that I mentioned that they installed, they're actually changing is it the flow rate on the pumps? So they're upgrading all of those, and we are evaluating additional options for the way that the data can be analyzed, and Sean can speak more to that because that's his wheelhouse, not mine. But we
We could, but we do try to be very careful because, we don't want to be seen as,
You don't wanna get killed in court.
Right, I'll add to it. Yeah. So the law is a little bit of both. In some places, it's incredibly prescriptive, right? Facilities shall have a groundwater monitoring program unless A, B, and C. And sometimes it says the department shall issue a waiver if the facility demonstrates A, B, and C. There are other places where it's a little more vague, right? Where it might say adequately characterize. And then we have to, exert some professional judgment on what that means, right? So, and that's where Tiana says we're careful, right? I mean, what we ask for has to be based in the law and, defensible, right? So, I mean, the Attorney General's office would want to know if they have to defend us in court, that we're in good standing for why we're asking for the thing. But there is a provision in the law for us to issue site-specific requirements if needed, but it's that site-specific piece, so we would have to demonstrate that there's a site-specific need. Right? Did you have a question before? Okay. Real quick, did anyone that hasn't asked a question have anything? Because I think we are about to overstay our welcome here. So, and we'll be around, we can hang out outside and have one-on-one conversations, but. All right.
Two quick little questions. One of them is kind of complicated, which is when you advertised this event, you said that specifically there will be no increase in the operations of the facility, and I feel like that is a little nebulous even legally, because right now, because of the consent order, it seems that they can only operate 3. So if they can only operate 3.
No increase over the existing license. But your point's taken.
Okay, but the other point, now I'm getting it. Oh yeah, back to the air monitoring. I'm a little confused. Just before this meeting, I was kind of told that there is, even though you monitor the air and come up with data, there's actually no limits as to what is acceptable or not. So you're just gathering data for the sake of making us feel good.
I'm gonna rely on John for some of this. So I think someone mentioned it earlier that we, that these facilities are subject to different regulations from different programs, right? So our license covers hazardous waste operations, and the statute says, for environmental monitoring, you will have an ambient air monitoring program. It doesn't give us any more guidelines than that. But then the air quality division has all their very complicated regulations for what kind of air permit you need or whatnot. So, John, I don't know if you can give us like a Cliff Notes version, because it's like, it gets to the emission. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you guys want to talk about the ambient air monitoring and whether or not there's regulatory thresholds that,
So the law requires that the facility operate an ambient air monitoring program to detect violations of Part 55, which is basically the air quality statutes and rules. To that purpose, they currently monitor at 3 locations. In the proposed license, they will be monitoring at a 4th location. They monitor for toxic air contaminants that we had agreed upon as a representative of potential air emissions from the facility. So we're talking about like metals, particulates, even some volatile organic compounds. Presently, there's no exact threshold in the license. So when the facility, they collect the monitoring data and they submit it to us. Internally, in conjunction with the air quality department, we look at that data both in regards to sort of what the upland monitors tell us, as well as what local or nearby ambient air monitoring stations operated by Eagle tell us to see is it relatively consistent with that. And then as well as that, we look at certain screening levels that are used in the permitting process to sort of evaluate like the magnitude of those concentrations Additionally, there are some contaminants like particulates and lead where there are established national ambient air quality standards, and we evaluate that data against that to see if air monitor stations exceed those levels, that's a trigger for us to tell the facility to investigate what's happening at your facility. Is there an issue with what your operations are? Is your air pollution control equipment working properly? Are you adhering to material limits in the air permit? And then it might even lend to a follow-up visit from either air quality or materials management division for an inspection as follow-up to that. Because ambient air data is highly variable, and there can be sources other than the facility. Earlier before this meeting, I brought up an example of other facilities have had elevated particulate readings at one of their air monitors, and they provided documentation that the construction was generating a lot of dust and it was located really close to their air monitor. And so that's sort of what we're looking at. Is it an offsite source? It is something with their operations, and then we try to resolve that.
But besides that, there's no enforcement.
It's not an emission limit, if that's what you're right. It's not an emission limit, right?
There would be no enforcement, but if it prompted an inspection and an issue was identified, obviously we would, but there's not a threshold. If you exceeded this emission limit,
You get a violation.
yeah.
Right, the ambient air monitoring under our license is not an emission limit. They have an air quality permit, and that would be the enforcement for that, but it would trigger us looking at their operation, which is the point of ambient air under the hazardous waste program, is it's another place we can look to see if that operation is having an impact. Because if you think about it this way, a hazardous waste license is a license to do an activity. It's not permission to emit something into the air or discharge something into the sewer. Those actions require other environmental permitting. So it's like a really multi-layered approach, right? And the ambient air is just one piece, but it's not an emission standard. Okay, I think we should probably wrap up. Jim, why don't you go?
Yeah, I think we do need to wrap up here. Staff will be sticking around a little while longer. Make sure that you put your email address on the check-in so we can follow up with you for some of this information that you've asked for today. That's gonna be an easy way for us to follow up. Tracy, do you have anything else you want to add?
Be quick. I just want to thank all of you for taking the opportunity. I hear you. I know that sometimes these meetings, do not feel super fruitful for you, right? I can appreciate that, right? We do appreciate you taking the time to be here, and like I mentioned before, I do find this community to be the most well-informed of any community we go to, and so when you have the opportunity to look at that license, if you want to compare it to data that's online, the old license, those are the kinds of comments we can consider. Like, for example, when we issued the Ecology Detroit North license, someone came to us and said, you issued that groundwater waiver the first time around on the basis that the whole site is paved. No, it's not, right? So I mean, we took that into account and we adjusted the license for it, right? So we can't consider these guys are bad actors and we don't want them here. Right? These guys don't notify us about their meetings. We can't consider that, but we can consider, hey, we don't think they're doing this right, or this backhoe is parked outside on the weekends when you're not around. So you can sort of see the categories there of what we can compare. So we're going to clear out of this space. We'll follow up with an email with some of those links and a reminder of the September meeting. And I just super appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much. Thank you.